because visual prospecting is something that I always just thought like sending a video, was good enough to put a video of me waving in an email. And that works really well. And I've used that with a lot of success. But virtual and visual prospecting, I'm super excited about because Justin Michael, he's been doing this stuff for over 20 years. So he's been 13 years in SaaS. He's worked at Salesforce. He's worked at Alumni. He's consulted over 100 startups. And one of the things that he showed me was this like concept of putting a Venn diagram or an image that like really gets the prospect to stop and think. And Justin is, since I've met him, one of my go-to resources now when it comes to prospecting and outbound and especially tech stacks and knowing what tools to use. And he's currently the RVP of sales at UAppy, a retargeting advertising platform. Justin, what's up, my man? Good to have you on.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Without further ado, so right, like opening's the new closing. How do we get the meeting, right? That's always been my role. And I did work for LinkedIn and Salesforce and Sean Parker and then a dozen different startups. And I was part of a very ambitious startup where our goal was to set meetings for 100 startups concurrently. And that's where we got really into visuals. There's a consultancy everybody should check out called Dogpatch Advisors, which is in the Dogpatch in San Francisco. And they go nuts with visual prospecting. There's a segment.io case study for this actually, where per email, they use coding to scrape sites to pull in the different logos. We're going to look at that with Jason, but here's a couple things. I think like one phone conversation is worth 249 digital interactions. So, what I figured out on the phones is if you have 10 reps calling and 2 are crushing it, it's an identical script, an identical ICP, ideal customer profile. Those 2 reps have tone as the differentiator, not the scripts, not the templates, not the rebuttals. It's actually their delivery of tone. It's psychological, it's neuroscience, it's millions of years of evolution. Now with email, it's really not what the text is saying, it's the visuals that your mind is processing off of the marching ants of the lexicon of the scripts that we write in. And so the whole industry is focused on like templates and scripts, and there's a meta of the templates, which we'll talk about. What I realized is like one picture is worth 60,000 words. So if it's going to take me 5 to 12 touches to get a meeting, why don't I just put a visual into the message? And you can't put in the first message in a sequence because it'll get spam caught, just like you don't want a signature. But the second or third touch, right? There's a company I love called Cloud App. And I know the CEO, they're awesome. And they do explainer GIFs. Like you don't have to know Adobe Photoshop. You can go into like the best moment in your deck or in your live demo of your SaaS. So I do a lot of tech to tech sales. So if you're in services, it might be something different. But you can take that little GIF of like 30 seconds and turn it into a file that's less than 50 kilobytes and then nest it in line. The whole key in programmatic email is that you're not clicking them off of the email, that it's happening in line. And it's a lot like holograms or fractals in that every message in a sequence has to be intrinsically relevant in that touch, because people are like time poor. And when they go in and they finally read that one message, it has to like have the whole universe encapsulated in that. And that's why visuals work, because when they finally look at a visual that explains like your competitive landscape, they get it. So I promised Jason I would interrupt here.
Yeah, just real quick here. And Justin's very fast, you guys. So I'm going to try to rein him in here, so that we don't overwhelm. Because I get like, oh my God, there's like so many things here. Let's talk about some of the neuroscience actually behind this. So you said a picture is worth 60,000 words. There's actually a lot of, because I was doing some digging on this myself, that people can process an image in literally a few milliseconds. And just to give you guys some context, the average reading speed is somewhere between 300 and 500 words for an adult per minute. So even 25 words in an email, that could take someone 3 to 5 seconds to read just 25 words. And that's like one sentence. So if you got a full email in here, it could take 15 to 20 seconds for someone to actually read an email, which is why people skim it or don't look at it, versus literally a few milliseconds with an image. But what else should we know? I know you're not a scientist, but you're very well read on this stuff. What else should we know about just the neuroscience and like why virtual and visual prospecting, like why having a visual element is really powerful?
Yeah, so I think we're very much story driven, like even to the roots of cave paintings and pictographs, and has traveled to the American Southwest, and I've been inside like Anasazi ruins in Chaco Canyon, New Mexico, and you see these pictographs and you go back in time. We're much hardwired for this. In fact, Mike Bosworth, who sort of came up with solution selling, reversed his thesis on process-driven sales to story sales with Ben Zoldan in the book, What Great Salespeople Do. That's a great book that talks about it. So, you know, the neuroscience around visuals is just a lot more information that you can gather a lot faster with a picture. And it goes into processing power. Like we all are in the generation of like AI and ML and, you know, self-driving Ubers. Well, that hasn't happened. There's still a person in the seat. So, you know, we're not quite there yet with AI and ML. And, you know, it's actually just going to be up to hacking these systems and subspecialization that's going to crack it versus full-blown artificial intelligence. For now, I think using visuals is a way that you can make your emails so much more powerful, so much quicker. I have just so much to say on the subject, so we should just crack into it.
Yeah, let's do that. I want just one other thing I think is important to add is this, like engaging the prospect emotionally.
Yes. Okay.
Go
So
ahead.
your brain is all human compute. Without getting into exaflops and terabytes and just how much data you can process, one human brain is the equivalent of all supercomputers on the planet. Right? So I talk a lot about hyper-personalization. There's level 1, 2, and 3. Technographics, psychographics, firmographics, you can look them up, but basically you can program machines right now very easily within outreach sales law fields to do the curly brackets and to see company size growth and high first name and connection in common, and you can build that. But there's elements of hyper-personalization that are impossible to build. And part of that is like doing a SWOT analysis or building a Venn diagram of your competitors or building some kind of visual or some wow moment in your software that no one else can do, and then just showing it to the prospect in line. What do you think of this feature? And now we don't want to be feature function benefits. We don't want to feature dump, but this is about visuals. This is about those moments that, like, you know, all things considered, there's this awesome picture, right, of like the BMW 7 Series, and every button, it has like, you know, 75 buttons, and then it shows the Tesla dash, and there's like 6 buttons. And so it's that kind of parsing where, you know, I've cracked this with GIFs, explainer GIFs, all small kilobyte files, also Venn diagrams. There's all sorts of different visual cues that we'll get into. So yeah, that's the science.
Cool, man. I know that we're going to get pretty tactical here. I thought it would be really important to just explain the why behind this and like why it works. But let's,
I want to hear a couple stories.
Yeah, there's one story I want you to get into. Like, how did you stumble upon this, and how did you use a Venn diagram to get some of these meetings? And then we have some really cool images, you guys, that we're going to screen share and show you, and all that stuff. We're going to get to like a template we're going to share with you too, so you can make your own Venn diagrams by the end of this. But yeah, what's the story? How did you fall into this, and how have you used this technique to get meetings?
Yeah, so I was involved as a case study in a book called Combo Prospecting by Tony Hughes, who's my mentor out of Sydney, Australia. And I used to walk through Chinatown in the snow and contemplate like how I was going to set these meetings for this attribution analytics company called Tune. And I just really had like a phone and a computer and a Gmail and some code and some tech, right? And so the chief revenue officer at the time had just done like the SKO, the big sales kickoff. And this guy, Ralph Hurt, was amazing. I've contacted him since writing the book, and he did a 350 slide deck. And I read the whole thing. So maybe that's like how I'm able to write a 70,000 word book or something like this. But I found in the middle of the 350 pages, this diagram. And I was like, whoa, because I sell mobile advertising technology where there's all these SDKs, which are software development kits. Like basically you need all these point solutions to make your app awesome, right? Like inside the Starbucks app is all this other cool tech, which is allowing for personalization and all sorts of alerts and things. And so I saw that diagram and I was like, wow, this totally explains how we're differentiated across all these various points. So I took a screenshot, Shift Command 4, just a little screen grab. And I started to put it in the emails. And I sent the email, kind of rough, right? They've proven that like just like a sales hacker email looks a little bit better than like a totally polished marketing email. And then eventually the marketing team started to pick up the Venns and even integrate them in a go-to-market strategy. And so I sent this thing to like the VP of mobile at Home Depot. And I've been calling this guy for 5 years. And he called my cell and said, pitch me. And I was caught flat-footed because I'm just not used to like getting a response at all. And then I sent it to the chief digital officer of McDonald's, and he forwarded it. First email, I got a meeting with the chief digital officer of McDonald's. So I thought, whoa, this is really crazy. So then like the marketing teams got a hold of it and polished them, and you'll see that. But my homespun one that was just built out of a deck that I built did really well because they kind of looked like I built it. And so that's where I almost thought about, well, should I do like Venn diagram selling and make this into a thing? You know, I ended up interviewing with a very prestigious tech company on the product side and did like a 6-page dissertation on neuroscience and visual prospecting. And then I went and met with Dogpatch advisors in San Francisco because I was really fascinated by how they were just, you know, approaching this with coding, because you could send 500 emails and have dynamic script that goes and reads the website. We'll look at a version of it. Like every time you enter a logo or a picture, or you know what their stack is, you could change the email per email. Yep. And then you're really doing personalization at scale. I was dabbling in common connection requests, right? If you do personalization at scale with a common connection, you know, everyone's going to know Max Altschuler or Reid Hoffman or Jason Bay, for example. So it's really important to create nuanced ways of using these mediums. So I'm diverting here a little bit, but visuals were, you know, a big part of the mechanic.
So yeah. Let's just take a look, because some people are asking, and what we'll do here, you guys. So I'm going to share this deck. All right. You can see my screen, Justin?
Yes. So I went to market with this diagram, and it does.
I'm going to share this link with everyone in the chat real quick. This is like a little gift for you guys today. There's like a little template creator in here. So you should have that in chat. But Justin, could you just explain real quick, what are we looking at in this diagram? Like, who are these companies, and why is it purposed this way? And this is an example of a really complicated version of this, you guys. We're going to go into something a little more simple here, but go ahead, Justin.
I will bring you into the story of this. So this is one angle, and I no longer sell attribution analytics. I love Kachava. I had a great run there, sold a lot of software. I also worked for Salesforce Marketing Cloud. So at the time, Urban Airship was involved in that. I also ran a region for Swerve and competed with Braze and competed with Localytics. I also had like a DMP and CDP that was part of the Kachava data set. And so what you see here is a vast array of technology consolidation. These are all point solutions that Kachava is competing with, that they consolidate onto a single data model and a single platform. So imagine how many emails I would have to send. Now, traditionally on a website, you see the grid. It's like the features and the comparison grids. But this tells this story. It tells this story that if I buy this software in the center, I'm going to get aspects of fraud prevention and deep linking and measurement and understand, you know, my cost revenue on ads and be able to do push notifications and be able to access data strategy. And so I originally called this the Red Lotus Venn, and I built it with Garrett McDonald. And I took a template from Lucidchart. Like, they have these free templates online. I just started to nest the logos and started moving them around. And even when I got it wrong and I'd send this diagram, people would often respond, hey, your diagram's wrong. And I was like, okay, let's talk about it. So I just send this diagram and say, let's talk about the implications of this diagram. And, you know, the response rates went through the roof using stuff like this. Now, this is more of a polished example of a go-to-market strategy document. There's a previous example, which is just sort of me with a Lucidchart. But actually, the less polished one worked really well too. So you can design this. Like, I'm sure everyone on the phone is competing, whether services or product, with 3 to 5 different companies. And let's show them another version, Jason, so they can kind of see the creation.
Yeah. So just pause real quick here. So the concept here, you guys, is that if you're a product, so Brandon, I saw Brandon's on here. He works at Zoom. So you're in a very competitive landscape, which you happen to be the best at it, in my opinion. But you're in a very competitive landscape where you guys have a lot of different features and a lot of different things that you compare and like really do better than your competition in. So this would be a perfect example. So a product like Zoom or any other product, we're about to get into a sales engagement example here where you're comparing things a lot and there's like really critical features where you might combine all of these tools into one place. This is a really good example. So here's one that I made. This is basically, this was inspired by Justin. So after the conversation with him, I was like, I gotta teach this to our clients. And one of the things that I looked at was sales engagement. So if you use Outreach or SalesLoft or VanillaSoft or Zand, if you're familiar with any of these tools, you know that they allow you to do multi-channel prospecting. And then you probably need to use one of these sources to get your data. And there's a lot of tools that just do email automation. But there's one tool in particular, and this is not necessarily an endorsement. I'm not sponsored by Apollo, although we use their tool. But if I was selling Apollo, I would put my logo in the center, or I'd put a question mark and like an arrow, and then I'd put that into an email. And we'll give you guys some context here in a second on how and what that email should say and all that stuff. But that's a really good example of like tool here, Apollo, that does data, multi-channel sequencing, and email automation all in one tool, and it explains the tool in one image. And if they're using these other tools, they're going to be like, oh, like they're going to immediately get it. What would you add to this, Justin?
Yes. So what's really critical about tech-powered sales and the book I've written on HarperCollins for 2021 and this type of exercise is that it's real for you and that you can take action and build one of these. It's not even that hard. You can just take a little Venn diagram of 3 circles and put your competitors on there, and you can actually make it rough looking and get it wrong and send it, and people will correct you, and it will improve as you go through the visual process. But I really want you to have actionable so you can try some of these visuals. All you're doing here is sort of like laying out. You could even do like a square grid where you have sort of more like a Boston Consulting grid or a SWOT analysis, or a square grid up into the right where you have different arrows and features. I just kind of like Venn diagrams. They're just kind of visually stunning in a way. And I too, I'm agnostic. I'm like Switzerland. I've used pretty much all of these vendors, or I'm aware of them. So this is less of a recommendation than a style, that you look for the strength in the center of how you can bring together these various disparate differentiators, right? And we're in a world of like snippets and kill shots and like grids and RFIs and RFPs, but I just find this to be a lot cooler. So whether you get it right or wrong, when you send it out, you're going to get a lot of feedback from it, and it's pretty cool. It's eye candy for sure.
Yeah. And Raj actually said something. He said part of the genius of this approach is that even if it's not immediately obvious what the value prop is, you as the viewer can't help but try to decipher what the heck is going on. And I don't know about you, when I read a text-based email, I'm skimming. It's not like I'm spinning up here. You know what I mean? I'm like really thinking, trying to process that. I just look at it as like, hey, it looks good or it doesn't. An image is like, whoa, when you see this, what's going on here, right? And you're trying to like put the pieces together. And that's exactly what you want, right?
Yeah, it's like, am I playing an 80s game show? It's like, what is the puzzle here, I have a friend named Bill Gerber who's at Adjust now, who sold me a tune, and he was at IBM in Core Metrics, and he used to have a diagram like this, and we called it the flux capacitor Venn, right? If I can show you a visual that takes your brain 60,000 words, we all know the expression, a picture's worth 1,000 words. If I send this Venn and my competitors show bullet points in a grid or like thickets of text, like the amount of visio and like brain firing, there's these F curves, that's what I'm talking about. So they wire up screens to people's retinas and they show where they look. And executives, you can see these, have them in the book where you have heat maps. It's called F curve snacking. Basically, like executives speed read. When you learn to speed read, you learn to take in the text like one paragraph at a time. And so the eye kind of goes to the subject line, the starting sentence down lower. It's like, and it's literally doing a fight or flight response, which is very old, like primordial. And so it's going to the top, the bottom, should I delete it? Should I delete it? And it's going around in like this F curve. And so some people design their emails in this F curve nature. I just try to totally quantum leap all of that. I'm like, let me break out of the text and just take you right into this visual portal, like just a warp field. And this is what it does. I mean, if you got this in an email, ask yourself like how different that would be than the last 1,000 emails, right? I put these in LinkedIn messages and emails too. And we have some more examples.
Here, let's get to a couple questions actually, Justin.
Sure.
Dude, people are really digging this. So, hey, in the comments or in the chat, you guys, let us know what you think of it, what your questions are, where you're having challenges kind of piecing this together. Like, let us know in the chat, or hit the Q&A if you have a specific question. But I want to get to a couple of these because they're really relevant. One of them, Lydia Sugarman, who I know, she's in our membership community actually. When I used something like this Venn diagram, I kept getting asked if we just integrated all those apps. How do you prevent people from making that assumption?
Yeah, well, you'll have people ask various questions about the diagram. And I take a very soft sell approach and start to just not sell the meeting. And that's very strange, right? I've studied a lot of Sandler and reverse psychology and Cialdini and persuasion, and I could give you a whole syllabus of why I do what I do. But the minute I also was great at fishing. I used to do similar to Lee Bartlett, who did the #1 bestseller in England. He's a ranked fly fisherman. I am not, but I did grow up fishing a lot. And so the minute someone starts to hit the Venn diagram and ask questions about the Venn diagram, I don't do what 999 people do. I don't ask for the meeting. I just start to intellectually chat about the diagram. Oh, it's the integration. No, this is what it represents. And then they're kind of shocked subconsciously that I'm not asking for a meeting. What are the thoughts about the picture? So I'll start to have a live interactive chat. There's some of my email threads on a 7-figure deal are over 240 interactions, because
Oh
to
my
me,
goodness.
email is about interactivity. And it doesn't matter the sentiment. If you're interacting with me, I've had people just like blow up on a diagram, like, this is totally wrong. Here's what you got wrong. I was like, hey, what's wrong about it? And then eventually they want to get me on a phone call. Hey, let's just have a call to talk about how much you messed up this Venn diagram. And that could turn into sale. But for me, I'm just gauging interactivity. Because if I send 100 emails and get no response, but if I can get 10 people to start interacting with me around this wheel of content, which encapsulates sort of a fractal of an industry, that's what you're kind of building, is this market map. You've seen them with the Lumascapes or the Dave Delaney V5 sales development map. So yeah, I think it's important to take counterintuitive approaches and then just keep refining it and have some kind of entrance statement. Like, did I get this diagram right? Or like, what are the implications of this for company name, your business? And you'll be amazed. Like, just ask a very open-ended vision question, like a spin question, like, imagine if you did what's in this diagram. And they're like, your diagram's all wrong. Or, oh my gosh, this is awesome. Does this mean you integrate? So yeah. You're
So
trying to
real
target
quick there. Yeah. So Lydia, that's good. If you're asking, what I'm hearing from Justin is, if people are responding, asking you questions, that's good, because most of the time people don't respond to your cold emails at all. So if they make that assumption, what Justin is saying, correct me if I'm wrong, Justin, is don't fire back and say, well, actually, no, we're not, but I'd like to do a meeting with you and give you a demo. Don't make it about that. Like, just tell them what it is. You're a tool that combines them all in one place,
Here's a good
not
one.
not something that integrates them.
How would you improve
There you go, Lydia.
this diagram? Do you agree with this diagram? How would you improve this? What are the implications of this diagram for your business? And then it's like, weird. Is this person doing market research? I disagree. Xant should be in the middle. VanillaSoft should be in the middle. Oh, really? Why? Let me try to improve it. The longer you resist your temptation to try to get the meeting, the more power. It's like your pendulum, like you're just pulling the rubber band. They're becoming more and more fascinated, but what you've really done is you've triggered them to keep looking at the image. And so it's like 60,000 words, 100,000 words, and they've gone so much farther down the path of your funnel on this pre-KPI of the email that it's kind of absurd, the amount of momentum. I mean, I've had visuals and emails turn into 6- and 7-figure deals in under 90 days using these techniques.
Yeah, so that's great, Justin. A couple other questions, if we could get to them here. Rajan says, does each circle represent key features of the competitors? Really, yeah, it's sort of the key features of the product that where you typically compare people. So that's the answer to your question, Rajan. That's a short one. But Justin, I thought you would like this one. Mindy McGrath asks, we have a tool that can integrate with other solutions, but we don't necessarily have partnerships with those companies. Can you use their logos without the company's permission? Like, are you going to get in trouble for putting people's logos onto an image and then throwing it into an email?
Yeah, I mean, this is a go-to-market email used for a manual approach. You'll typically see white papers coming out with like Forrester waves and G2 crowds, and you'll see, at least in the spaces I work in within ad tech and martech, where you have 7,000 vendors, where integration is key. You have Salesforce Marketing Cloud and Oracle, where they literally have an ISV channel where there's an encouragement to write open APIs. I think you know your own business in that regard. If you're in highly regulated industries like HIPAA compliant, or it's healthcare, big pharma, fintech, there could be more restrictions there. So you should leverage it at your own risk. But my rule is, if the competitors are using my logos index and on their websites, and there's literally, if I have a competitor in SaaS and they have a feature grid and it says Acme Corp feature, and then shows the 3 closest competitors, if they've gone to market with that, well, we could go to market with bullets and a comparison RFI chart, or I can just release my Venn of what I see as the differentiators. So I think this comes out of like really combative high tech sort of plays. But so far I haven't had a problem with that. Now, I didn't put this Venn diagram together today. And I basically support all the vendors in this chart in my book. I've tried to take an agnostic approach where as far as sales engagement platforms, like you really have to figure out which one's right for your business. There's some just for recruiting now. There's some just for mitigating churn. So
Yeah.
the Venn can be anything. Try to use non-proprietary data and try to put your solution in there. You could show who you integrate with. And I think that would be a great visual that you'd have in a deck. Keep in mind, this is an ABM list. You're not spraying this to 10,000 people. You're taking, 200 targets. This goes hand in hand with account-based marketing and account-based sales development, where you're taking a named list of targets where this is very relevant. You may not even send this out of a sequencer. You might take your top 50 accounts. I've seen people customize Venns per account. So it can get pretty crazy and granular if you like.
So one of the things people keep asking about is what might this look in an email? So I figured what we could do, because I have another example. So what if we just copy and paste this into an email like this? And what it sounds like, and I'll link to this, you guys, so you have it. Like what you could use as a CTA in the email is like, so like if I was Apollo, I might send something like this. Hey, noticed you guys are using outreach with your 25 SDRs. So you asked, what are the implications? What kind of question would you ask, actually? You're the expert here.
Yeah, so I'm like, well known.
Again, we're not showing any favoritism towards any of the sales engagement tools because I get in trouble when I do this. I'm just using this as an example. Yeah, I happen to use Apollo, not sponsored again or anything like that. But what kind of question would you ask in an email like this? And what, just to put you on the spot here, Justin, we didn't prepare for this part, you guys.
I do all sorts of like backflips and base jumps and pattern interrupts, right? Like I tend to test things like spectrums and pendulums, like even saying hi or hey, or even seeing how little text I can put in there. So I might just put like asterisks. What are the implications of this diagram for company above it? It might not even be a standard looking email. Like it could be one sentence. I'm already like in a touch pattern where I've like contacted them on a first email and then I'll bump this in a reply and just nest it. The key for me is I'm never trying to have a prospect click away from the emails. Whether they're in Gmail or in Outlook, the message bumps up and then there's another message in it. I want them to click in line on their smartphone and be able to like access it. So I'd say, what are the implications of this for ABC Company? Do you agree with this diagram? How would you improve this diagram? I've done all sorts of interesting ones. Like, do you agree? Question mark, short, punchy. And then what's cool on Gmail is if you make it small, they can click it and it gets big. So you can actually have like an under 50 kilobyte file that is clickable and they look at it. And I've even had people redo the diagram and send me back. If you can imagine that. They were probably
so I love this. So essentially you're going like heavy on the pattern interrupt here. You're like, I'm not even going to write this like a normal email. And just for clarification here, because people are asking, in terms of like when you would send an email like this, you said not in the first email, like where would this fall in a typical email cadence?
So I never send emails that have signatures. Obviously I will use CAN spam compliant opt-out inside outreach. I might turn that off and actually manually write it for spam filters on the first touch where it's PS, if you'd like to opt out, please do so that I'm compliant. But on the second or third touch, that's where I'll just drop in with a diagram or a GIF. I guess the founder of GIF calls it a GIF, but I'll have an explainer video and be like, what do you think of this? Or what if you had this one feature? So like feature function benefit selling is bad. You don't want to data dump. You don't want to lead with features. But when you only have 3 split seconds and you have like the same file sharing technology as 25 other competitors, I mean, we're all commoditized. It's just so easy to make a SaaS and launch a company. But if you do have a moat and some IP or something proprietary that you can visualize and put in an email, and if you can just nest it in line, it's really powerful. So touch 2, 3, 4, 5, usually touch 2 or 3, because that accelerates the momentum of 5 to 12 touches. You're getting them there visually and getting into the storytelling earlier. So yeah, this is what it looks like. There's not a lot of rocket science. My favorite is I got access to a whole CRM system and was able to send 300,000 emails in one push of a button. And what I did with this, I put quick question, holding a VIP event, who should attend? And then I had the opt-out nested. I mean, my purpose in sending email is to make it look like it didn't come from a machine. I'm always trying to make it look one-to-one and then scale it to many. And so it's imperceptible to the recipient that it's coming out of a sequencer. That's always how I'm challenging myself to make
Yeah.
it like more human than possible. And see, when you show these, and like this diagram is great. You could even like have the logo sizes. You could make it rougher, like the circles aren't lined up, the logos don't look good. Like if you're bad at graphic
Yeah.
design, that's awesome. The more it looks like you scratched it on a napkin. If you look at like Aaron Ross diagrams in the books of predictable revenue, I was telling him the other day, like
Yeah.
I love his images because they're like sketched with watercolor. Like you just, you know, your sales manager is just sitting on the whiteboard drawing these concepts versus the thing looking like it got, you know, totally polished, right? So bad is good and short is better. I feel like I'm the Oscar
So,
Wilde of cold email.
dude, I love this. So just to step back a little bit, you guys, because I'm getting to some of these questions, and
260 participants. This is awesome. I feel like we need a DJ booth at this point.
I know, dude. This is freaking cool. So one other thing, because you alluded to this, Pat, and this got upvoted a lot in the Q&A, is how do signatures get caught in spam? So can you quickly explain like how a spam filter works, especially at some of these large companies, like especially Fortune 1000s has very sophisticated spam filters to keep cold emails from getting to the recipient. What are some best practices in the email signature that you should take in consideration?
Yeah, so I like to send from Gmail, and the first email should be stripped of all HTML fonts. It should just be text, subject line 1 to 3 words, and the copy should be 3 sentences with a call to action or CTA as the last bit. And I write hyper short emails to the point where I like have to get them approved by marketing because it's like not a marketing email. And then the other thing is I sequence my frequency assertively. Perfect word for that. So I don't go touch, you know, day 1, day 3, day 5, day 7, day 11. The best story ever is Jeremy Donovan, SVP of strategy at SalesLoft, using the Fibonacci sequence to do it. I
love that.
So like we all have marketing automation and Marketo and Pardot and HubSpot and ways to like opt into an email list and send the email list. The problem that SDRs don't see is when they send infrequently, the prospect sees it and they're like, I didn't sign up for this list. Like, take me off your list. So when they use automation inappropriately from Outreach or SalesLoft and it's not moving fast enough, it's triggering the prospect to say, take me off your list. So I think it's really key to no formatting, you know, nothing in the first email, as close to text only. And then I send like every 48 hours. I might break for 72 hours. So my stuff's pretty assertive over 30 days as compared to others. And why? Because you will get a no, remove, take me off the list. I'm not on the list. But the biggest one is refer, because a lot of what you're doing is flanking and routing, which is military strategy. So if you're going after VP sales all day, do a campaign to HR directors. If you're doing a campaign to VP of sales all day, go a campaign to the marketing directors who sit next to the VP. When I used to sell sales technology like Sales Navigator, we had cyclical marketing budgets where, you know, enablement they pull the budget. No, that's why BANT is dead. No one knows where their budget is. But a great way to get into companies is to start moving lateral the ICP and to flank and to find title arrays that are disparate. So this is a whole other topic, and I'm getting off the subject, but it's probably still relevant.
So no, this is great, man. Pat, so email signatures, good best practice, and especially for the first email as a whole, no links,
no
including
image,
including the signature. Yeah, take out those images. All that stuff is going to flag and get you put into spam. So there you go, Pat. Another quick question, because I think we already answered this. Susie Sliffer, I hope I'm pronouncing your last name correctly. I know you, Susie. We've talked before. When you send a prospecting email with a Venn diagram in it, what do you use for the subject line? We kind of like looked at some subject lines here. Do you have any other ideas on, you said 3 words for subject lines. What are some other variations of stuff that you might throw into email for subject lines?
So sometimes something no one's ever seen, like I actually was sending the Red Lotus Fen as Red Lotus Fen as the subject line. You know, I take a lot of risks. Okay. One of my best subject lines ever is growth. Who doesn't want to grow? What product or service in the world is not for growth? So I just do like growth, like an action word. But remember, I'm bumping. So like these are bumps. Like you sent an email with a basic thread and a title and you're bumping up, because the nature of Gmail and Outlook is when you send recurringly on a thread, it bumps back up to the message. I don't know if that's like my signature word for it, but I call these spears and bumps. So what I typically do is I'll take the marketing stuff and compact it like a trash compactor into 3 sentences, and I'll pull just the social proof out. You know, we drive this result for these companies, and I'll make it hyper short, like painfully short is my rule, mobile responsive design. And then I'll send imagery in the replies and the bumps nested. so that it's just the way it rolls up. Test this stuff on your iPhone 10 or, iPhone 25, or send it to a friend and look
Yeah.
at it and do some test runs.
So Stephen Chase said Cobra Kai as the subject line. So I like this, Justin, growth as the subject line. Another one that I like to use is like if I was sending something like this, I might put 3 of the company names in there. And one of those including like one that's in their tech stack. So that's another really creative thing that you could do. Great question, Susie. So Justin, let's get to some of these other examples, because some people are like, well, what if I'm not selling a product that's like this clear of a comparison between features? What if I'm selling services, let's say, or what if I'm selling something that isn't an all-in-one solution? Another variation of this that one of our clients is using now that works pretty well is, so basically what they do is they help companies save money on shipping. And there's typically 2 methods that a company uses for shipping. There's LTL, and the thing with that is the rate's really good, but the service is poor. And there's FTL, great service, on-time delivery, but it's really expensive. And what they do is a thing called STL. So it's the best of both worlds. So you could think about, how is a company currently handling a particular function, and what are the alternatives? So it could be do it in-house, outsource, overseas, use VA, whatever, right? Like there's all kinds of different ways that you can compare how they might be getting something done, and then point to the middle. What if you could just do all 3 of these things? And you could even do that with service providers too. So like a marketing agency, for example, that does like pay-per-click, does social media, does content, manages social pages or whatever it is. Like those are examples of everything in one that's more of a service type of thing. Or you could compare across the landscape. What other, and maybe we can look at some of these other examples, just like what are other things that you could compare besides like features between yourself and competitors?
So I found there's one called Ikigai, which is a Japanese concept of like harmony, where there's like all these Venn diagrams. It's an epic philosophy. There's a hilarious coffee one that I've shared where it has like mocha latte, and it's all these Venn diagrams. You just go like funny diagrams. It has movie plots where it compares like Batman, Robin, and it just, you can Venn anything in your deck as you start playing with it. So just go like put in best Venn diagrams to Google and look at these, and then transpose it to your business. Let's go forward to some of the more complicated slides, like slide 5. This is put out by Steve Blank, who wrote, I think it's 3 or 4 Steps to the Epiphany. I'm going to quote the book wrong, but he's a professor at Stanford. And so here he's taking Xana and comparing it to different ecosystems for learning, right? So this diagram to me, I don't know what it means, but if someone sent this in an email, I would respond and be like, can you tell me what this means, Steve? So this was taught in class, but I picked it because I love the way it looked. Like this works so well, everyone on the call, you could just like not even get it right. And as you email it, it'll get fixed, which is a total MVP, right?
Yeah. So one thing, I have another idea here. So Kevin Gilman asked, if I sell a product, and I know Kevin, what's up? I sell a product that doesn't have many competitors. How would this work? So one thing, Kevin, because you're selling, like you're essentially helping them with like advertising, is you can do their competitor landscape also. Great. So what you could do is like, you could plot out the company you're reaching out to, especially if you're going after named accounts. And let's say you work like 25 to 50 per month. You could put all of the ones that are related, put them all on a Venn diagram and kind of chart them like this into different categories. And they're going to see their own logo on this Venn diagram. And that's going to be like, oh, because I posted an example of this with the sales engagement stuff, and several people commented from the vendors in that companies or that weren't listed on that Venn diagram. So it elicited a really emotional response. So you could put their logos on there too. So Kevin, hopefully that helps. But any other thinking, just while we're brainstorming, I know we didn't even plan for this part of it, Justin, but any other stuff that comes to mind?
I think people will have a light bulb go off. Go to slide 6, please, the next one. So this is Dog Patch. So you're familiar on the left. So one thing about my writing and my approach is I assume that you're savvy. I'm assuming you use Sales Navigator or LinkedIn Premium, that you're using some sort of sequencer, whether that's HubSpot or SalesLoft, Outreach, Xampp, one of these things. You're familiar with curly brackets, at least mail merges, right? So what these guys are doing, and it's kind of amazing, is they have that personalized manual opening hook. And then what they're doing in this case study for segment.io, and if you reach out to me on LinkedIn, just Justin Michael, I can share with you. This is the example of the email rendering on the right hand. And it says, I asked my designer to mock up what this might look like for car price, which is the target prospect. But what you're seeing in the imagery is dynamic. So for 1,000 emails, the screenshot in the monitor is a script that pulls a snap off their homepage dynamically. It's a piece of code that just like a robot that goes and gets that. And then it sees the technographics of the stack. And this stuff's probably living in a spreadsheet or another script. And so for 1,000 emails, what this is highlighting, Segment is this wrapper, which allows you to have all these different SDKs, all these, like you put Segment in your mobile app and you have access to like a constellation of vendors, right? But the beauty is this is dynamically changing in every single email visually, visual dynamic change, which I'd never seen. This blew my mind. I looked all over the world for this stuff, and it's being triggered out of a sequencer using persona value 1. These could be custom 1, custom 2. For those of you familiar with how to do customization with curly brackets, all you're doing is you're assigning a field to another field in an Excel file or a database, and then you're just matching a field, right?
Yeah.
So we could go to that quite a bit, and then I want to show the last one on step 7.
Just a quick comment on that. That's a pretty complex thing to do if you're a rep and you're not like managing a lot of these tools.
Yeah.
So I shared it. You guys check out Dogpatch Advisors. Like they're a company that can actually help you do some of this stuff at scale that you might bring to your company.
It's true. So this is really interesting. I don't really know what this means. I just loved it because this has a lotus diagram, because we're all used to sort of the Olympic rings. And so the template of that lotus and what it's saying, so traditionally how to understand a Venn, for those back in, I didn't really go to school traditionally. I left, I didn't go to college. So I was pretty happy when LinkedIn and Salesforce hired me anyway and kind of relaxed the college bias. But it is kind of cool to make diagrams like this and influence go-to-market strategy. So what you have in the color codes is each color code just represents a different thing. So in this case, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things. So any system where you have 6 bases of comparison, this is really complicated. So you could do SWOT analysis this way, but this gives me like a lot of questions, and I would probably respond to this email and say like, what the heck does this Venn mean?
What is this?
Yeah, so I was talking to Jason earlier, the art of confusion. Our job as SDRs or XDRs is to pique interest, is to create a visual model that makes someone ask a question and want to interact with you. The other thing we're doing is we're all outrunning the bear, right? Like if a bear started chasing me and I had a motor scooter, no matter how fast and great Jason's shoes are, I'm going to outrun the bear. So like I started to ghost drive, like look into CEOs' LinkedIn inboxes. I'll be like, let me just look in your LinkedIn or let me look in your email. And I started to see this really uncanny factor that every subject line was identical. And every opening line is like, hope you're doing well, just reaching out. And I just thought like, how can I be dramatically different, like the purple cow, like Seth Godin, and really stand out? So if I send this image that they've never seen and ask, what do you think of the image? That's just like a weird email, right? But this is meta, right? You can't copy my template or my diagram. You have to make it for yourself and then figure out the question that triggers it. And so like John Barrows says, A/B test, A/B test, A/B test. So get a template like this, get funky with it as far as, is it gonna be a competitive analysis of logos, which the first one's focused on? Is it gonna be a SWOT analysis of strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats? Let's go back maybe to the more simple ones and then just do Q&A on the call. I think it's helpful to maybe go back to that example because everyone on the call is dealing with these.
Yeah. So one like clarifying thing you guys hear is, because people are asking, should my logo go in the middle or should the person I'm reaching out to? Either. It depends on what you're comparing. So one thing about putting your logo in the middle is you kind of make yourself the hero of the hero's journey, which is not always ideal, but it could probably get a response. So for example, if I was prospecting, so maybe what you do is so you could use this other Venn diagram that showed opportunities. So maybe you take this logo out of the middle, right? And you go something like this. You're reaching out to one of these companies and you point to these areas and say, there's opportunity here. What do you think? And people are asking, what should I put in the email? That's it, you guys. The email, what Justin's saying is the pattern interrupt is the image and then like one sentence. What do you think? Are you taking advantage of these opportunities? And you just point here. Or, hey, I had some ideas on how you could be front and center with all of your competitors.
Here's a challenge.
That's it. That's all the email is.
Totally. Any 240 of you, I'm just Justin Michael on LinkedIn. If you try this, I will give you my advice on it. So if you email me with a diagram, I will get back to you. Just try it. So few people will actually even try it. It's like personalization, right? Everyone has these power dialers and power sequencers, and you get hi first name, and then the curly brackets fail. And we've all received this email that's like hi first name, curly brackets, and it didn't render. But if you just try this, something visual, it's worth going into Cloud App and explainer GIFs. Everyone on the call probably has a PowerPoint presentation and something visual they're doing. Usually within a 30-minute discovery call or a demo call, when they use a deck or they live demo the software, there's a few moments that are amazing. Capture those moments. Use a Cloud App and get 3, 4, 5 seconds of this awesome thing. Like, you know, maybe in one of these platforms, there's like liquid syntax where, isn't this cool, where we can, the software sees that there's a director of sales and it changes the call to action for director of sales and then changes it for VP of sales. Or here's where the software is automating sending a personalized connection request on LinkedIn. What does that look like? Right? So you're sitting inside the software, you click here, you nav here in the UI, and then this box pops up.
Yeah.
Capture a video of this. And then like another thing I say is imagine. I'm like, imagine if you had this capability, and then I show it. Because a lot of us are working in tech-to-tech software. So let's go back to slide 1. It's so fun.
Yeah. So just a couple quick questions, Justin, because people are asking. You guys, for this Venn diagram, if you have access to this, the cool thing I did here is I left a template in here for you. So if you just literally go to file and make a copy, you can make a copy of this and plug in your own stuff here and just take a screenshot of it. You don't need fancy software to create a Venn diagram. And can we get the software recommendation again? Like if someone wants to create a GIF, essentially, like what's the software? Because those aren't like super easy to make.
Cloud App. It's getcloudapp.com. I know the CEO. Okay. He'll be happy about this video. It's kind of similar to how I recommend Chili Piper because I tested it against Calendly at scale and it's really strong.
Got it.
I make these Venn diagrams literally in Google. I just go to like Google Presentation or Google Slides.
And that's what like, this is. Yep, Google Slides.
I'll just go Google search and I'll put like cool Venn templates and then I'll get one.
Yep.
And then when you do a Google search, you can search for logos based on PNG, based on transparent. If you go to Google, there's a special setting that says transparent background. So you can pull almost any vendor logo immediately, drag it to your desktop, just start dragging it into Google. And then you can build one of these in minutes. And it's especially powerful to make it look stick figure-y and like not produced and to mess it up and then send it. Now, a lot of you are probably in more corporate environments where your social media is regulated. You have to get it tested. Like, make sure you understand your governance. I've worked for fast-moving startups where they're encouraging to say, hey, try new ideas, try a video prospect, send some visuals. It's all good. So I'm grateful for the latitude to do that. This turned into something beautiful. I mean, Kachava has turned this into a go-to-market diagram that's really brilliant, that highlights just the depth and the breadth of their stack in a world where the average company has like 91 solutions. And my prediction is that sales tech's going to get like this. We're going to go from like 500 vendors. That's why I was shocked. I looked up SalesLoft and Outreach, and first thing I saw was Zant, which was formerly Inside Sales. And then there's 75 companies that do sales engagement. So if you're selling sales tools, wouldn't it be great to line up how, like diagram 1 here shows how you consolidate all these different features, whereas diagram 2 is another consolidation story, but more differentiated. There's a lot of ways to do this. I'd love to get to questions. We only have like 10 minutes left.
Yeah, let's, do you want to rapid fire on some questions?
Yeah, rapid fire. I'll do short answers if I can.
So which is most effective, infographic and chart, meme, or personalized video? That's an anonymous question.
The answer is A/B test, A/B test, A/B test.
Yep. There's no perfect one.
Let the data decide. Make 10 of these diagrams, send them all in different cohorts, create a blended A/B test and outreach, and see what gets the most reply rates with the best sentiment, right? A/B testing is very hard because you might get super high open rate and very high reply rate, but those could all be take me off the list. So you also have to have the quality of a sentiment, how it converts, right?
Yep, good stuff. Does this work on all generations? Chris asked. I think that's a great question because there's this kind of thoughts around, hey, if it's someone that's in their 50s or 60s, let's say, that didn't grow up with this technology, is it still okay to do this? Like that kind of thing. Not
Well,
Sun ageist, but good
Venn
question.
diagrams are very much like the MBA course of the 80s and 90s. So actually a lot of people who went through business consulting from like Bain or Boston Consulting Group, there's something called the Boston Consulting Diagram. And there's actually some of these charts you can make that are square strategic diagrams. You see them in almost every sales and marketing book. But any kind of SWOT analysis where you have like an arrow this way, an X and Y, Z axis, and then up and to the right is like what you want them to do. It's the confluence of these systems. Those are also very good to send. It's any visual eye-catching chart. It could even be a Gantt chart or a SWOT. So actually that stuff really appeals to different generations that went through like dramatic levels of schooling and had to memorize all this stuff and build them a lot back in grad school. So it's not necessarily bad. And then the younger generations, I think, love it because it's refreshing to see the visuals. And if it's very techy, it can be very cool.
Yeah, love it. Joelle asks, what if you don't necessarily want to tell your prospect who your competitors are?
Well, I think they're going to see on G2 Crowd or any of these,
Yep.
it's a consumer world of research. So I think the cat's out of the bag on who your competitors are. Like, are you triggering the RFI or RFP? Are you calling the competitors in? There's that potential. But if you sell like pretty cutting edge technology, right? If you sell CRM, like you can just assume Adobe's in that deal, Microsoft's in that deal, Salesforce in that deal, right? The competitors are kind of known. So for small disruptive markets, if you really do want to keep the competitors secretive, just anonymize them based on what they do. Just take 3 circles and be like, well, this system is all about, I don't know, I'm gonna take an industry, privacy, security, and maybe data governance, and then show the 3 and then put yourself in the middle. And then you can just say, here's the vendor landscape. You don't have to put what the vendors do. You can just do the function of what they're strongest at.
Yeah.
Highlight the 3 strongest and put yourself in the middle as consolidating all 3. Consolidation is huge because of the explosion of technology. Everything is commoditized. So no matter what industry you're in, product or service, you have 100 competitors. And the biggest competitors do nothing, the status quo. And so it's always about, in this economy and with the crisis, about cutting costs and reducing vendors and consolidating and having the one vendor to rule them all. I haven't really found a space where the consolidation story doesn't work, but maybe I'm like way too close to tech and I just, I'm like an ostrich here with my head in the sand.
Okay, one other one, because we got to get you out of here in time. Minal asks, how many videos in your cadence structure is too much? And is it better to have them early on in the cadence, later in the cadence? What are your thoughts on video and where to put it and how often to use it?
Well, let's mash this up. What if you do a vidyard and it's just kind of like Jason's in the corner of the screen? What if you do a vidyard walking them through this Venn diagram? So there's a mashup. So it's like a video walking through the Venn and what it means. 5 to 12 touches holds. I've used visual prospecting systems to set meetings within 2 or 3 touches very consistently, usually just because there's a novelty to it. There's this other thing right now called Cameo. I don't know if anyone's heard of the Cameo app, but you can have basically like Snoop Dogg read a prospecting message, or Bob Saget, or someone on the Real Housewives. That's novel. So there's a novelty, right? If everyone starts using visual prospecting, will it wear out? Will it lose the novelty? No, because your visuals are your own. Everyone has a deck, clear slide. They all have a PowerPoint. And so it's infinite. As long as it's authentic to your prospect, whether it's competitors or philosophy or SWOT analysis or just strategic points, right? You can level it up. It doesn't have to be feature benefits. It can be, vision themes. And so, reach out to me on LinkedIn if you need help building one of these. It would be a fun exercise. It'd help me upskill for sure.
So I linked to those 2 documents, you guys, because some people are still asking like, how can I create these templates? I want to see this stuff. What do emails look like? We went through all of that. So check out those documents. Just make a copy of them and start using it yourself. And Cameo is a really great idea. And 2 things, Justin, that you want to leave people with, right, is you have an advanced copy of your book that's probably only going to be available for like a week because you're sending it off to a publisher, right? Can you tell us just real quick more about the book? And I'm going to share the link to that too in the chat, everyone.
Yeah, so I kind of pulled like a Linus Torvalds and a Radiohead. I just sort of gave away 60,000 words per minute, and about 1,000 people read it. Every single person made it better. And from the executives in the tech companies to luminaries I respect, like, Aaron Ross and Mary Lou Tyler and various people who are the world's experts. And I came out of nowhere and did this. What I found is that the SDR-AE construct is an industrial complex, right? It's brilliant, like Henry Ford, like we just have openers and we have closers. But what happened over the last 10 years since the book came out in 2011, it was the Bible of Silicon Valley scaling, is that there's so much tech, it's choking out the rep. Reps are only selling about 36% of the time, and only about 60% of them are hitting their quota. And so my book is called Tech-Powered Sales, but it was fundamentally about TQ, which is distinct from your IQ and EQ. And that's for a technology avoidant rep to dust off their tech stack. And you might not think you have a tech stack. I saw a comment over here, out of the game for 15 years. You've got a Gmail. How many things are you logging into? We call it AFL, another friggin' login, or FNAC, a feature, not a company, right? Everybody's in this huge tech stack, whether they like it or not. And here's the thing, if you know how to use these tech stacks and optimize them, it makes you recession proof. It makes you irresistible. I always joke, there's always someone on the staff that knows how to make Salesforce make pretty reports. They never get fired. So yeah, I wrote a whole book that's an exploration of the deepest technology stacks, and it assumes you, the reader, are savvy. And it's not about how I could set records at sales. It's about helping you Kaizen get 1%, 5% better, and MacGyver what you have. Use that toothpick and an umbrella and a popsicle to go land a meeting, right? What I've shown you on this call is nearly free. It's just your time. Just get like a Google sheet, take images off Google, and you can bring these visuals together. Cloud App is not a very expensive app, but it's really helpful. So you don't have to do the GIF compression and the Photoshop layering, and it's very quick. But there's a bunch of screen caps. I think you can just screen cap right out of QuickTime. You can just get a screen snap with Skitch, or I think Evernote has a product now, but just Google free screen cap generators, and it's easy.
Dude, this has been great, Justin. Everyone, I put the links in the chat so you can get the links to the 2 documents we went over, to Justin's book. Say hi. Please say hi to him on LinkedIn. Let him know if you have any other questions. And before you take off, if you got value from today, I have one favor to ask. Just could you please share the tour with one other person at your organization, or another person you think would get value from this? And we have Richard Smith from Refract this Thursday talking about the anatomy of a winning cold call. You guys are awesome. Bunch of badasses out there. I love the participation today. We had over 300 people at one time log in. So this is our biggest webinar yet.
Add me on LinkedIn. I need to break the 30K cap. I'm there to help you. I will respond to your message. You'll be surprised. Thank you.
All right. Later, guys. Thank you, Justin.
Great to see you.
Later, everyone.
Cheers.